Hello and welcome to this Enlisted guide video. Today I'll be covering the topic of soldier perks, again as an update to one of my previous videos. Most of the information in that guide is still relevant, however, some of my opinions on the perks have changed, so I just wanted to make an updated guide, in the form of a tier list, for 2025 and onwards. I won't be covering the vehicle perks for pilots, tankers, APC drivers and bike riders, as that will come in a separate video shortly, in a similar format to this one. First, let's go type by type for the soldier perks, being mobility, vitality and weapon perks, and at the end I'll go over the soldier type specific perks such as engineers, medics, etc. The first perk we're going to look at today will be the movement speed whilst crawling or crouching. So what this perk does is that, obviously, when you crouch down or crawl, your movement speed is increased. This does have a pretty big impact on your crawling speed, although there's not really much use to crawling inside Enlisted. It's not the most useful thing. However, the crouching speed when you max this perk out at 3 points is actually quite noticeable, and in some cases I would say it's the fastest way to peek whilst ADSing. So if you want to peek around a corner and you know an enemy's there, it's worth to take this perk, crouch, aim down sights and then come around the corner, and you'll be the fastest you can possibly be while being deadly accurate. It's debatable if this is the best thing ever, as you could still kinda just come around the corner and hip fire anyway, but I still do like this perk when I have the points to spend, so I'm actually going to rate the crouching and crawling speed perk as an A tier useful perk. Secondly, let's look at the speed of extinguishing fire on a soldier, and personally, this perk isn't useless. It can save your life if you've been set on fire and you're low health and you can survive with this. It's okay, but generally, if you get hit by a flamethrower, you're probably dead. At the best, you can trade a kill with the guy who's holding a flamethrower on you. If it's a vehicle flamethrower, you just die immediately. They do 25 damage. So I would say this perk, I would avoid the extinguishing speed perk. It's almost like it's okay to spend points on, but I think because of the crawling and crouching speed perk existing, that's a better perk to dump 1 or 2 points in if you need to get to the higher tiers. So yeah, I would avoid the fire extinguishing perk. The next perk we have in the beginning of the mobility tree is the maximum jump height perk. And I think this perk is okay if you can actually make use out of it. There are a few maps, and I'm sure if you use this perk all the time, you'd be a lot better at knowing the little spots you can jump up to and mantle up on top of roofs and stuff. So for the utility it gives at what it's meant to do, it's actually pretty good, but I wouldn't say it's the most useful perk ever. It's tough to say. You could combine this with I think one of the sniper classes have a jumping height perk that you can combine this with, and I think one of the anti-tank gunners might as well, or maybe that's the jump climbing speed, but either way combining those is okay. I think that generally for what the maximum jump height perk does, what it's meant to do, it does really well at, but I would say still avoid this perk unless you're really going to make use out of jumping to grab onto a ledge to pull yourself up over, to get into the top of buildings or onto the roof of buildings. For that job it's good, but generally not the most useful thing ever. Up next is the speed of changing pose, and I'm just going to immediately put this in the fine to spend points on. It's 1 perk point, it gives you 50% crouching and speed of going to being crouched and speed of going to being proned. If you need to avoid a bomb or grenade, crouching or proning really fast can save you in that situation, and you should always be crouching to shoot fully automatic weapons anyway, as the massive recoil benefit you get from crouching. This perk is always going to be useful. However, I would say side-by-side comparison of crouching with and without this perk is really not the biggest deal ever. It's okay to spend the point on if you need to, but it's not mandatory, I would say personally. Up next, let's look at the medpack usage speed perk, and most of the time this perk is going to be useless, except for the scenario where you're downed on the floor and you need to pick yourself up. I would say for an average or less experienced player who's maybe not as used to just immediately swapping to a new soldier when you go down, this perk is good. you can pick yourself up very quickly, and with certain soldier types, you can get back up off the floor in like 1.5 seconds, which can really surprise enemies if they're, you know, reloading or they're looking for your other squad members to kill or something. You can surprise them by jumping right back up, but generally, if your soldier goes down, they're going to get finished off on the floor. So it's better to just immediately swap to a new soldier anyway and not really rely on a medpack usage speed build. It's very strong at what it does, but I would say it's fine to spend points on, because it's not something I would say avoid completely. I would definitely say there are players who can make use out of this perk, but the competition it has within the mobility tree, I would probably go for something more like 10% run speed or 15% sprint speed. Now I'm grouping these perks together because they do the same thing but on different types of soldiers. For every soldier type, except for Rifleman level 2, you should be trying to get 15% sprint speed on every soldier. This is a massive speed boost to, obviously, running around the map, and you have to do a lot of running in Enlisted, and it's nice to do it faster, and it's powerful to be doing it faster. I put the run speed here with the sprint speed, because on Rifleman class 2 soldiers, they come with a 5% sprint speed passive perk. Combined with the 10% running speed here, that's effectively the same as if you had 15% sprint speed, meaning Rifleman class 2 soldiers can spend, I think it's 6 points for this perk, instead of the 16 for the sprint speed perk, meaning you've got 10 extra points to spend on other perks, such as crawling while moving speed, or our next perk, weapon aim speed. Now, weapon aim speed at 20%, you'd think, is this good or is this not? I think recently it's actually become quite useful. But probably not in the way that you expect. You would probably want to take this perk on soldiers that are going to be using weapons with a slow weapon aim speed, such as LMGs or maybe like a rocket launcher. But actually, you can make use of this perk on weapons that already have a good weapon aim speed, but not the best weapon aim speed. So I'm talking about weapons like rifles or select fire rifles like the T20 or the FG42. Adding 20% weapon aim speed is really useful, and visually it does feel like you're aiming in a lot quicker. I would highly recommend to try out some weapon aim speed on guns that have mid to really good weapon aiming speed. I would avoid it on LMGs. It doesn't really make a big difference there because it's a percentage based boost. So if a weapon is slow, it's only getting a small boost. It doesn't make a big difference. But for a weapon that's like quite fast or middle tier kind of aiming speed, this can bump it up to the next tier and suddenly it's a fast aiming weapon. And that can be quite nice for when you're quick reflexes running into the chaos and you need to just aim in at targets and take them out. This is quite a useful perk. The next perk is the climbing speed perk, and this perk feels really nice to use. I think I'm gonna place this in the B tier. Again, I'll go back to these perks at the end and maybe adjust some if I feel like compared to other perks they're not as good or maybe they're better. But I think I'm happy so far with the mobility perks. But here, the climbing speed perk. This feels really nice for when you need to jump in through a window or climb over a wall. But realistically, if there's an aware enemy on the other side of that wall, you're never going to get the gun up quick enough to take them out. If it's an AI soldier, I found that even with 100% vaulting speed like this, AI soldiers can still kill you before the gun is ready to fire at them. So this perk feels really nice, but it doesn't end up actually doing that much. I might move this down to an avoid perk later on, because I personally can't make good use out of this, except in scenarios where maybe you need to climb over a wall and get your rocket launcher up to kill a tank. Like you're flanking a tank, and the tank is like, just become aware of you as you're climbing over a wall. This can be a difference maker in those situations, where the tank turret has still need to turn or the machine guns. But again, like, climbing into a building full of enemies, you want this to be good. But it just doesn't make a big enough difference, like, ever. Very sad. I'm very sad about this perk, because there's so much potential there, but it's okay. Moving on to the Vitality perk tree. And I'm immediately just going to put these two perks into useless. So this perk on the right here, the health regeneration amount out of combat and health regeneration speed out of combat, this sounds good on paper, but in reality what it actually does is that, for example, say you have 10 health on your soldier and you've been hit for 9 damage. You go down to 1 health. After, I think, 6 seconds, you'll begin regenerating your health up to 3. There is very few scenarios where going up to 3 health matters. You can be hit by a pistol for 4 damage. You'll die. Or, well, maybe you'll go down. But anyway, taking this perk actually doubles the effect, so after 3 seconds instead of 6, you'll regenerate up to 6 health. Again, 6 health, it's really not that useful. There's a lot of weapons that just do 6 damage. You're still gonna die in 1 hit. There are a lot of weapons that do 10 damage, or 15 damage, or 20, and this perk isn't going to matter because you just got hit for 20 damage and you immediately died. This perk is one of the worst designed perks I've ever seen in any video game, ever. It makes no functional benefit, it doesn't really do what it says on the text, it's confusing and it's a massive waste of points. This is okay to put 1 point in, maybe, if you need to get to higher tiers, but just remember, it's not going to do absolutely anything for you, even when maxed out. Now, I'm actually going to take back my statement on the breath holding while aiming. This is useful on sniper soldiers, and maybe if you're really long range and you need to hold your breath to aim and get the little bit of zoom, if you can make use of that, that's okay. I'm going to put it in the avoid. I'm not putting it any higher. I would really not recommend like maxing out either of these perks. They are just there usually to dump points in, because as you'll see later, the vitality tree is not the best tree ever, and we just need to spend a few points to get to the higher tiers. So, in comparison, let's actually look at one of the good vitality tree perks in the stamina regeneration speed. I'm honestly going to put this at a must-have. For a single point, you're doubling your stamina regen speed. This is a massive boost. This means after sprinting, you can sprint again faster. After sprinting, you'll recover your stamina quicker, which means your weapon is not going to be swaying around as much, because you probably have noticed, I hope so, that when your stamina runs out in game, your soldier is out of breath and they cannot control the weapon as well, and you aim down sights and it's looking off into the left side of the screen and then it sways over to the right. You can't hit the target in this chaos combat and you die. Stamina regeneration speed can help with that, because there will be less situations where you're fully out of stamina because the stamina will be regenerating twice as fast. This perk is fantastic. Another perk that I'm going to put in useful, but I usually don't take myself because you need to spend 2 or 4 perk points to get the maximum benefit out of it, is the resistance to like explosion, head shake, and concussion. This perk is very useful, it's just hard to fit into a lot of perk builds because of the amount of points, which is 4. Not a lot of soldiers can get enough points to have the spare utility to take this, but it is a good perk. It's just questionable because sometimes if an explosion goes off nearby, you probably died? Or maybe it's an ally that's stunning you, and that's okay then in that case, because you're not going to die when an ally tank shoots right next to you or blows up inside the building that you're standing in. You will need to recover from the head shake. This can be okay then. It's a good perk, there's not really much to say on it. There's a lot of explosions inside Enlisted. Just be careful that you're not dying to them. Then this perk will be quite useful. Up next is another perk that usually in a game like a first-person shooter would be really good, but in Enlisted struggles to see much use, which is the aim stability with firearms after receiving damage. Now, my understanding of what this perk says it does is that if you get hit, your soldier flinches, which makes your aim, it's flinched. You jolt off to the left or jolt down to the right maybe. Your soldier is not aiming where you want to be aiming because he's just taking damage. It's it's replicating, like it's simulating. In Enlisted, this is not that useful because usually if you get hit, you're gonna die. It's the same kind of problem that the health regeneration perk has, is that you're not going to be able to get much use out of this because you might just get hit by a 30-06 round from a bolt action and, well, you see God. In cases where maybe an an AI soldier grazes you in the leg and you don't die to it, or maybe you're in a fight with a user who has an SMG, this could be an okay perk, although it's very expensive to get the full 80% aim stability. You need to spend, I think it's 2 points per level, so that's 8 points, and that's very expensive for what this perk is doing, and the fact that it's not really all that useful most of the time. So I'm actually going to put this in the avoid section. As you can see, yeah, the vitality tree is really shaping up to be pretty bad, and this might be a hot take for some people, I'm gonna put this health restored by medpack into the useless category. I think that using a medpack to heal yourself, especially if you only have one, is kind of troll, because you're not, again, if you've survived a hit, you're probably not going to recover enough health from natural regeneration and a medpack to actually survive. I think a medpack heals for 3 health, so I guess if you combine these healing perks, you'd regen up to 3 or 6 health, and then a single medpack would heal you for 6 or 9 health, which would take you up back to 10, 6 out of 9. Yeah, you'd go up to 15, you'd be able to recover a full health on a vitality perk soldier, although if you're spending this many points to get that, there's no way in hell you have a vitality perk putting your soldier up to 13.5 health. There's just no scenario where healing more is good. There's no scenario where really healing in Enlisted is good, because you're lucky to survive a single shot anyway. Surviving another is not really going to make a difference. Okay, so surviving another shot would make a difference, but there's no perks in the game that make a good enough difference to survive another shot. Healing with the medpack, it's really not worth it, just save it in case your soldier goes down and you can revive them. Lastly, before we look at the actual namesake vitality perk for the vitality tree, let's look at the stamina boost perk, and I think this is a useful perk if you have extra points to spend on it. The problem with the vitality tree is that these perks are quite expensive for what they do, but they are very good perks. Doubling your amount of stamina is really useful. Again, like with the stamina regeneration speed, you can sprint more, you can sprint further, you can bayonet charge further, there's less likelihood of you being out of breath and unable to aim the gun properly. However, the problem with both of these perks, although a little less with the stamina regeneration perk because it is only 1 point, is that you could just drink a flask. Now a flask gives you infinite stamina for 60 seconds. You don't have to regenerate stamina, you don't spend any stamina outside of bayonet charging for balancing reasons. But again, you have to drink a flask, which takes 3 seconds to do and isn't always effective on your AI soldiers for following you around as they run and use stamina. So I would say this perk is useful, but it's expensive. It's hard to get this perk and have enough points to take the vitality perk. Now moving on from the stamina boosting perk is the vitality perk, and I'm going to just immediately say this is an S tier must have perk. This perk makes a massive difference to your survivability in Enlisted. Your soldier has 10 health, and with this perk they now have 13.5 health. This hits a lot of breakpoints that make you more difficult to kill with SMGs. For example, there's a lot of SMGs in the game that do like 6.7 or 6.5 damage. Now, 6.5 damage per hit would be 6.5 and then 13 in the second hit. You still have 0.5 health. You're still alive. This means it takes 3 shots for an SMG to kill you. If you are in a fight and you and an enemy see each other at the same time and you've both got a similarly powerful SMG and you start shooting each other at the same time, you're going to hit 2 shots, they'll die, their 2 shots will hit you, and you won't die. This is very, very powerful, and it does affect the game a lot. If maybe an enemy has thrown a frag grenade, or there's an artillery explosion, like not directly next to you, but there's a bit of distance, or maybe a pistol is fired against you, or a long-range weapon, this vitality perk makes a huge difference, and you should be able to notice that you survive a lot more things than you think you can by using the vitality perk. There is a bit of a, depending on the tier that you're playing, there are quite a few guns that just do like 20 damage, even at like 100 meters, meaning it's not as useful in those situations because 20 is still going to one-shot kill a soldier with 10 health, a soldier with 13.5 health, a soldier with 19 health. You're still going to either be killed or go down. However, with the Vitality perk, it's more likely that soldier actually goes down because of how the downing system works. I don't fully understand it, it is a bit confusing, but essentially you have 10 health and you have 10 down health. So if a shot does 21 or 20 damage, let's say, that's 20 against the 10 and against the 10 that you have when you go down. So that soldier would just immediately die. But if that same shot did 20 damage, but you have 13.5 health and then the 10 for the downed health, you'd have 3.5 downed health left, which I don't think you'll always be downed. You still die most of the time, but it's much more likely that you actually go to your knees on the floor and can recover. But anyway, Vitality perk, very useful. In some arguments you could say it doesn't really do anything, but it still has an effect. But another main reason that it is so good is that every other perk in the Vitality tree sucks. So you may as well take this anyway, just because it's one of the only good ones, so why not make your soldier tougher to kill? Up next we have the weapon perk tree, and immediately I'm going to put the 50% weapon changing speed as an S tier must-have perk. It's only 1 point, and its effect is incredible. So swapping from your main weapon to maybe your axe, or a shovel, or a grenade, or your pistol, or anything, it's just 50% faster. If you have picked up another gun off the floor, or maybe an SMG and you have a bolt action and you want to swap to a long range weapon to shoot somebody off in the distance, does it quicker. If you need to switch to a grenade to throw it, they'll do it quicker. If you need to swap to an anti-tank rifle or anti-tank launcher, it's quicker. This perk is just incredible. It's going to always come up in the gameplay, and for 1 point, there's really not any reason not to have this perk. Now, another perk that we'll look at, and I'm not 100% decided on how I want to rate this perk for everybody else. For me personally, I think that this perk is useless. We'll put it for here for now while I explain my reasoning. So 15% speed of decreasing the shot spread after quick turning, and minus 25% shot spread after quick turning. So what does this mean? When you turn rapidly, let's say you need to turn to the right 90 degrees, and you do that with a flick of your mouse very quickly, this means that your gun becomes less accurate before it recovers and becomes accurate again, because you've quickly turned. Your soldier is like, they need to re-aim their weapon and readjust themselves. This perk reduces the amount of added dispersion from quickly turning and will quickly shrink that circle back to your weapon being accurate again. Now, I'm pretty sure that for ADSing the weapon, this doesn't matter at all. And for hip-firing weapons, the problem I have with this perk is that from my testing in the mod editor and looking at it, the debug of the actual spread of the weapons, the weapon without this perk already resettles fast enough to being accurate before you can actually aim at a target. I was trying to spin 180 degrees and then find the target and aim at the soldier, and I could never do that fast enough for this perk to have a use case. And that's in like a perfect scenario of like controlled situation. I know I'm going to turn 180 degrees. I have a rough idea of where the soldier is. I'm experienced at using the mouse. I would, I'm not trying to brag. I'm going to say I'm proficient at aiming in video games. I couldn't aim quick enough for this perk to have any effect. So based on my own testing, I would say this perk is useless. But other people have made arguments that it does have a good effect, and I've seen other debug videos where it looks like it's better, but from my own personal testing, I think this perk is a waste of points. I don't think it has an effect. I would be more than happy if somebody puts together some evidence and some debug menu stuff that proves that this perk is actually good. I would be more than happy to admit that I'm wrong about this, but for me, for now, this perk sucks. Don't spend your points on it unless you have to, but I think a better use of your perk points is probably the melee damage and melee attack speed. Now, I'm not going to rate this perk as incredible. It's okay. It's okay to spend your points on. The problem with the first part of the perk, the melee damage, is that outside of a knife, which does 10 damage, so against non-vitality soldiers, a knife will always kill somebody in one hit, in one stab, they're down, unless they have a vitality perk, in which case you would need 2 points in this perk to get a 50% melee boost to go up to 15 damage to beat their 13.5 health. That part of the perk is kind of useless because outside of the knife, every other weapon does like 20-25 melee damage, being bayonets, axes, swords, so the melee damage is not that useful. The melee attack speed, however, I don't actually know how useful it is in determining like, oh, I'm gonna swing my weapon at somebody, if that really makes much of a difference or if it's just like the time in between attacks. But where this perk is useful is on a soldier that needs to shovel. If you are going to dig a hole with an engineer, I take this on all my engineers because I give them all shovels. If you're going to dig a hole to put a rally point in, this will do it 5 to 20% faster. Now that's not the hugest benefit in the world, but if you need to spend the points to get to higher perk tiers, this is actually this will be useful to you in spending your perk points and not just be like a filler perk, like, oh, I'm going to put 1 in the health regen kind of thing. So the melee perk, don't focus on it, it's not great, it's just useful if you're going to dig a hole or maybe, you know, it's better to spend your point on, in my opinion, than the dispersion perk here. Now the other tier 1, I guess, perk for the weapon tree is the throwing range of grenades, and I think that this perk is useful. The only problem is that if you only have this on one soldier, it's kind of counterproductive. So in theory, having a 50% throwing range of your grenades, either for frag grenades or explosion packs, I don't really make use of the other grenades and smoke grenades and molotovs. I think they're all pretty useless, but you know, if there's a building you need to throw a grenade into from a further distance, or there's a tank, you can throw the explosion pack from a safer distance. That is very good, very powerful. The problem is that you need to use this on every soldier, and you need to practice with it, because you'll have probably built up a muscle memory at this point of how to arc and throw your explosion packs, and this messes with that muscle memory. So I'm going to leave it in useful, although with the caveat that if you are always using this perk, yes, it's good. If you're not always using this perk, it's going to be difficult to get used to, it's going to mess with your muscle memory, and especially if you just have this randomly on like one soldier in your army, that guy's going to really throw you off when you aim your grenade perfectly and it just goes flying past the target because your guy has been eating his Wheaties and he just lobbed it. So our next perk is the 12% firing rate whilst using bolt actions. Now this, I would say, is fine to spend points on a soldier that you are going to keep in a lower battle rating who will actually make use of bolt action rifles. Now this perk doesn't make the biggest difference in the world. The one example I have is a bolt action like the Type 38 Arasaka rifle, which I believe has 72 rate of fire off the top of my head. With this perk maxed out, that 72 goes up to 80, and in my opinion, the rate of fire in a bolt action is one of the most important statistics for them. So obviously increasing the fire rate by 8 per minute is going to be, I think, a noticeable difference. The only problem is that, you know, this is quite an expensive perk to take, and you can't really make use of this on a generalist soldier, say a soldier you're going to take from BR5 and then use some FG42s and then you take him back down to BR1 and use a Kar98K. He's only going to be making use of his 12 perk points when he's using Kar98K. So I'm going to move this up to a useful perk. The benefit is noticeable, but again, you need to make sure that you're actually using this on a soldier that will make use of it. You can't just put points into this perk and get use out of it when they're using like an SVT-38. It's a semi-automatic, it's not a bolt action. I did say in the past that this perk was useless, but it was bug fixed and now actually does something. Can you believe it? That for years at a time, there was a perk in the game you could spend 12 points on and it did nothing. Like, oh great, thank you for fixing that, Darkflow. It only took you too long. So another perk that I would put at, I would say, useful. I don't think it's a must-have perk. Is the firearm reload speed. This is always going to be useful. You always need to reload your gun, and you will always want to do it as fast as possible. It's just expensive. I believe this is 4 points per level, which makes it an 8-point perk to max out for 12%. Combined actually with Assaulter's 4, I would say if you're using an Assaulter soldier, an Assaulter tier 4 soldier, this is a must-have perk, because they come with the passive benefit of a 12% reload speed. Combined with this, that's a 24% reload speed. You're going to be reloading lightning fast, and especially on guns like, for example, the Fedorov assault rifle, or maybe the Thompson 50-round drum. This gun, this perk is very useful and must-have on those soldiers. But I'd say on other soldiers, it's useful. It's not a must-have, but it's nice if you have the points to spend. If you have full points left over, take this perk, even just for a 6% reload speed boost. It's a very good perk. Probably, which will be our last must-have perk, is the Firearm Vertical Recoil perk. We'll see if another perk does come up, or maybe I change my opinion on something at the end of the video when we recap. But 40% Firearm Vertical Recoil is massive. So if your weapon has 40 vertical recoil, that's upward movement per shot, and you take this, that's minus 40%. So that's 24 vertical recoil instead of 40. That definitely didn't take me too long to figure that out. But yeah, combined with the 30% vertical recoil you get when you crouch, you can take fully automatic weapons at tier 5 and they have basically no recoil when you're crouching because you've removed 70% of the vertical recoil. This makes so many weapons in the game much easier to use, and I would say is mandatory for some weapons that have very high recoil. And yeah, this perk only costs 12 points to max out, and I would say it's a must-have always. There are very few weapons in the game that have a higher horizontal recoil than their vertical recoil, but I would say that generally within Enlisted, most weapons have a problem with the vertical rather than the horizontal. You don't really have to worry too much about how much it's going left to right. It's easier to manage than the bumps it's doing upwards, so this perk is incredible. The next perk we'll look at is the greater chance to get in the down state and the 50% down state time before death. So the second part of this perk, honestly, it's useless. If this perk was only the second part for the time that you can be on the floor, absolutely worthless. However, if you put one level, which I think is 2 points, into this perk, it's quite good. It gives you a flat 10% chance to go down instead of just immediately dying, which combined with stuff like vitality, or maybe if you're going to use medpack speed, this is a good perk because it's more likely your soldier will go down and they can recover. So I would say on important roles like maybe your radio operator or the engineer or the anti-tanker, this might be worth spending a point on because they have specific utility that you need to keep them alive, and this increases their odds of survival. But do not ever put more than one level, which is 2 points, into this perk. You are gaining absolutely no other benefit. It's just a waste. So I'm going to leave this perk in the fine to spend points on. It could be said to be useful, but it is a bit of a noob trap if you put more points into it. So remember, only put 2 points or one level into this perk. Lastly, for the weapon perks is the horizontal recoil control. Now, you can gain 30%, I believe, 30% vertical and horizontal recoil control just by crouching. But as we mentioned with the vertical recoil perk, a lot of weapons really don't struggle with their horizontal recoil. It's quite manageable and doesn't really make an impact on like if you can hit your targets or not. So I would say that out of the 3 perks that cost 16 full points for their benefit, this is an avoid. This is not as good as sprint speed, this is not as good as vitality, it's not even as good as 3 points in this vertical recoil. This isn't useless, but for the points, you could argue it's useless because who has 16 weapon points to put into horizontal recoil? This is definitely... yeah, I'm going to put this in the useless tier. I think just the opportunity cost of all the other good weapon perks you can get, because you're spending 16 points here. Some soldiers, they only reach 16 weapon perk points. This perk is absolutely useless. You should probably never be using it. Maybe there's like 1 or 2 cases on a gun or like maybe a premium squad that this is actually useful on. But for everybody, just do not take this perk. Moving on to class-specific perks, let's first look at the Engineers, which is the building speed and the resources available for building. So I think I covered these in my Engineer guide much more thoroughly, but I would say these are both... Okay, so the building speed is useful. If you are taking your Engineer and you want to build a rally point faster, this will build a rally point faster. However, compared to the sprint speed, I think it's more effective if you need to travel somewhere to build a rally, you will build it quicker with the sprint speed. If you don't need to travel to build something, obviously the 50% building speed is better. If you want to fortify an objective with sandbags and barbed wire and check hedgehogs, take this perk over the sprint speed. Maybe if you have like one engineer in the engineer squad has the sprint speed because he's going to build your rallies, and then the other engineers are going to build all the fortifications. This is a great perk to take in that scenario. So yeah, this is a useful, good perk, which is surprising for most class-specific perks are quite bad, as you'll see. But this one is actually quite good. And the resources available for building, again, if you're dedicating to building some fortifications or maybe like an AA gun or something, I mean, this is like, it's okay, it's fine to spend your points on. I wouldn't say avoid it completely. It helps engineers do their job better. It's an okay perk to spend points on, but then again, you have to sacrifice your vitality perk, so it's your choice there of what you're trying to achieve, obviously. Up next, we have the medic specific perks, and oh, this is a little bit of subtle foreshadowing, but, well, let's just explain what these perks do. So 100% uses of the medical bag. I believe by default the medical bag has either 10 or 20 uses, and this means that without consuming your actual med kit, you can heal your allies, only your allies, you can't heal yourself with this, 10, 20, if this is... See, like, this perk is so useless, I don't even know exactly how it works, because how often are you actually healing your teammates in Enlisted? And like I said before with the the health pack restored and the med kit healing, like, this is just not useful in the context of Enlisted. If you are being hit in Enlisted, you are probably dead, and this is okay, you know, like, I think that it's better to aim for your vitality perk first on the medic before grabbing this. Like, it's very questionable if any of these perks are good. The healing speed of allies, I would say undoubtedly useless. With the syringes used from the medic class, you already heal people in like 1 second, or you already revive people in like 1.5 seconds. So this is definitively useless. This one you could make an argument for, this one absolutely useless. The 200% health restored when healing allies, this is, I guess it's good, but actually in theory, if you're using the medic to heal your allies, you actually want to have more times that you have to heal them, so like 2 or 3 times you have to heal them back up to full, because that's going to give you more score, which translates to more XP and silver. So like, why would you want to take away, you know, your minimal earnings for doing the hard work of healing your allies by healing them better? You would just use more syringes on them. So that's why I would place this in the useless category, not just because I think it's useless, but also because it's kind of griefing your own like score making potential with a medic. Although, like, please Darkflow, please buff medics to being useful in some way. I think they are definitely the worst soldier class in the game. They are just completely useless, and they are so useless that I actually even forgot another medic perk, which I'm going to put into the useless category, which is medkits available in medkit box. Actually, I'm going to leave this in the avoid. You probably want to take other perks first, but allies using your medkit box gives you XP, so I guess if you're farming XP with medics, you want to have more uses from your medkit box, which means more allies will pick up medkits, which gives you more XP. That's the wow, medics have really got a breakthrough perk here in the medkits available in medkit box. Woo! Up next, another perk I would say is actually probably useful if you are using mortar class soldiers. This is a must-have perk. Along with the engineer in a mortarman squad should have the resources available for building, because that means you can build more ammunition boxes to refill your mortars, and if you have this must-have mortarman perk, you'll have more mortars, which means more time shooting and blowing up the objective, or tanks, or vehicles, or just enemy soldiers in general. Funnily, I don't think mortars are the most useful in Enlisted, but this perk is a must-have on mortar men, purely just because of the value you get out of having more mortars. Now, a perk that is very similar, you would think, to the mortarman and would be a must-have is how much flamethrower fuel you hold, and how much you get back when you resupply at an ammunition box. And I could see the value in this. I'm not going to put it as a must-have. I think it's better it's better as a fine to spend points on kind of perk. You know, if you can take other perks first, it's great. This is like, the problem I have is that if you're in a situation where you're using all of your flamethrower ammo, you're in quite a dangerous position anyway. You're probably going to use this and then either die during using your flamethrower, or you're just in such a hazardous position that you are going to eventually die as the flamethrower soldier. So I don't think that this perk is the best thing ever. It's arguable. I don't use flamethrowers myself that much, but having more flamethrower while you flamethrow is good, obviously. I guess I'm being a bit too harsh on this. I would put this in the useful tier, for obviously only flame troopers can take this, but it's useful, but not a must-have. I don't think you'll always make use out of this perk whilst being a flame trooper, whereas having more mortar ammunition you will probably always make use out of. That's kind of my criteria here, is that these must-have perks are always going to be giving you a benefit, and it's a really good benefit. The useful perks will probably always be giving you a good benefit, although maybe not always, but they are good benefits, and you can see how these perks down here don't do very useful things, or they don't do useful things a lot of the time, so yeah. The last perk we'll cover today is the minus 60% damage when hard landing with a parachute. Now on its own, I would say useless. I would say very, very useless perk. You take minimal damage from parachuting anyway. You're not really like trying to use your parachute as late as possible and using this perk to minimize the damage. You'd rather just land safely with all your health, I guess. Although this perk, from what I've been told by other people, I haven't actually tested this myself, but I would say this is a fine perk to spend points on for a hidden benefit, in that this actually just reduces just all fall damage for paratroopers, meaning you can jump off of roofs and take basically no damage. Which, if you're going to land on a roof and then, superhero jump off the side and kill an enemy rally or surprise an enemy soldier or squad, like, that's actually quite good. How useful that will be all the time? If I knew that this 100% worked myself, I would put this as an A tier useful perk, but I'm not 100% sure that it actually does, so I'm going to leave this as a fine to spend points on, because taking no fall damage can be useful when you need to avoid fall damage. However, if that bug is fixed, or that bug isn't actually real, and I've been lied to, then yes, this would be a completely useless perk. I don't think that you get any benefit out of having this. You'd rather spend your mobility points elsewhere. So let's recap on the tier of perks and move anything around if I feel like I need to. So yes, I would say that these are still... This dispersion perk I still think is useless, but I do want to move it up to an avoid rather than a completely useless, because some people, I could be completely wrong and it does have a benefit. I don't want to. I would say if you have 1 or 2 points spare at the end, you can take this. Maybe it does something. I don't think it does, but 1 or 2 perk points can't hurt, so I'll leave it as an avoid. Yeah, I still think all these perks are useless. These perks have like utility, but it's like, how often can you get? Yeah, I agree with these still. Fine to spend points on. Yes, yeah, I still agree with that. Useful. Yes, very useful, but not a must-have. Very useful, but not a must-have. Yeah, these are all I would say if you are using a bolt action soldier always, maybe this is a must-have. Because, you know, you don't really need the recoil reduction on a bolt action. So maybe this is a must-have perk, even though I don't ever really make use of it myself. I think if you're going to make dedicated soldiers for battle rating 1 to 2, where they're going to always have a bolt action, yeah, I guess this is a must-have perk, huh? And these must-have perks, I would say these are always must-have perks, yeah. These are only just in the order of mobility, vitality, then weapon perks. These are not in an order of usefulness. If I was going to order 100% in usefulness, I would do... Okay, I'm happy with these two tiers. I would say the perks to the left of their tier are the stronger perks that are more worth your points if you have those points to spend. I hope that this perk video has been useful. If you have any differing opinions, or maybe you have something to say about how I've rated these perks, I would love to hear. I would love to start the discussion in the comments. I'll be happy to more argue my points here, expand upon them if you have questions about them. I would just love to. I welcome any criticism and any discussion and feedback. I would love to hear from you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you have a great day.